Welcome to the second part of Lesson 6 Rocks. In the previous lecture, I discussed igneous rocks with you. In this lecture, I will discuss sedimentary rocks, their formation, their characteristics, and the different types of sedimentary rocks. Now we come to the second category of rocks, the sedimentary rocks. First, we start with formation. When rocks are exposed on the surface of the earth, they are broken down by weathering and carried away by forces of gradation like river, glaciers, winds, and ocean waves. So, the sediments which are produced due to the weathering process are carried away by these agents. These sediments are then deposited. As you can see, the various sediments are getting deposited underwater. The sediments are deposited over long periods of time in seas, lakes, streams, etc. Subsequent layers are added. As you can see, first layer, second layer, third layer. So sediment is getting deposited in different layers. And finally, due to the weight of all the layers from above, the sediments get cemented together to form sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are called secondary rocks. If you remember, igneous rocks are called primary rocks because they were the first rocks to be formed on Earth. But sedimentary rocks are called secondary rocks because they are formed by the solidification of sediments of original igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic parent rocks. Now let's discuss the processes involved in the formation of sedimentary rocks. The whole process of turning loose sediments into hard rock is referred to as lithification. And lithification involves these three main processes: evaporation, compaction, and cementation. Now let's discuss these one by one. Let us start with the weathering process. In the weathering process, the bigger pieces of rocks are broken into smaller and smaller pieces until they turn into sediment. The sediments are then carried by agents of erosion like running water, winds, etc. and they are finally deposited in seas, lakes, streams, etc. Then the next step is evaporation. In this process, water from loose material is evaporated, as in the case of rock salt. The accumulation of rock salt mainly takes place through evaporation before being compacted and cemented. Then we come to the next step, compaction. In this process, the sediments, after piling up, are gradually squeezed by the weight of the overlying layers and the hardness of the underlying layers. For example, sand is compacted in this way to sandstone. Next step is cementation. Cementation is the bonding together of compacted sediments by natural materials such as calcium compounds, silica, and iron, all of which have the properties of bonding on the loose materials. And then we have the final product, that is sedimentary rocks. Characteristics of sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary rocks are formed from materials derived from other rocks. They may also have plant and animal remains. These rocks may thus contain fossils. As you can see in this picture, a very well preserved fossil of some ancient animal can be seen. And the study of these fossils is very important because these fossils help us to understand the process of evolution of life on Earth. Sedimentary rocks may be formed through different processes and are also classified on the basis of their formation. The process that turns loose sediments into rocks is called lithification. Sedimentary rocks are the most widespread on the surface of the Earth and constitute about 75% of the surface area of the globe. Sedimentary rocks are generally not crystalline. They are soft and layered as they are formed by deposition of sediments. The different types of sediments are consolidated and compacted by different types of cementing elements like calcium, silica, etc. Sedimentary rocks make extensive landforms. They do not make massive rock forms like batholiths and laccoliths. Now we will study the classification of sedimentary rocks on the basis of formation. And the first type is mechanically formed rocks. Mechanically formed rocks contain fragments from the breaking up of other rocks. These sediments are also called clastic sediments. The breaking up of older rocks takes place through denudation by agents like running water, moving glaciers, and wind. In this process, the sediments are gradually squeezed by the weight of the overlying sediments and the lower layers harden to form rocks. Since such rocks are formed in layers, they are known as stratified rocks. For example, shale is a mechanically formed rock. So here you can see shale and you can see all the different layers or stratas which are very clearly visible. So these kinds of rocks are also called stratified rocks. So shale is a mechanically formed rock and it is formed by the compaction of silt and clay-sized mineral particles. Here are some more examples of mechanically formed sedimentary rocks. Claystone, formed from the lithification of clay. Sandstone, from sand. Loess, from the lithification of wind-blown silt or sand. And conglomerate, formed by the lithification of gravel. As you can see in this rock, the different pieces of gravel are very clearly visible in the rock. Chemically formed rocks. Chemically formed sedimentary rocks form by the direct precipitation of minerals from water. When dissolved minerals come out of water, the process is called precipitation. The accumulation of minerals takes place in lakes and lagoons. The minerals are compacted through evaporation. For example, gypsum, rock salt, and potash. Rock salt is found in the Dead Sea, Aral Sea, as well as in Sambar Lake in Rajasthan. Organically formed rocks. These rocks contain remains of dead plants and animals. Limestone, which is a calcareous rock, is formed by skeletons, shells, and animal remains. It contains large proportions of lime. The rocks like peat, lignite, bituminous, and anthracite are termed as carbonaceous rocks. Other types of organically formed rocks are siliceous rocks, formed due to dominance of silica content. Chalk is a form of carbonate rock. It is formed due to precipitation of carbonate materials. Here you can see the examples of organically formed rocks. Limestone, this is chalk, and then this is chert, which is a siliceous rock having high content of silica. I spoke about carbonaceous rocks in one of the previous slides. Coal is a carbonaceous rock because it has high content of carbon. Now let's see how coal was formed. Coal formed millions of years ago when the earth was covered with huge swampy forests where plants like giant ferns, reeds, and mosses grew, as you can see in this picture. As the plants grew, some died and fell into the swamp waters. New plants grew up to take their place, and when these died, still more grew. In time, there was a thick layer of dead plants rotting in the swamp. The surface of the earth changed, and water and dirt washed in, stopping the decaying process. More plants grew up, but they too died and fell, forming separate layers. After millions of years, many layers had formed, one on top of the other. The weight of the top layers and the water and dirt packed down the lower layers of plant matter. Heat and pressure produced chemical and physical changes in the plant layers, which forced out oxygen and left rich carbon deposits. In time, material that had been plants became coal. The remains of animals and plants which have become hard and turned into sedimentary rocks such as coal or petroleum are called fossil fuels. The formation of coal takes place in stages. The first stage is peat. Peat is just partially decayed plant matter in swamps and bogs. It has over 60% of organic matter and lots of moisture, which limits its heat content. With increasing heat and pressure, peat turns into lignite. It is a soft brown coal that still has lots of moisture. It has higher heat content than peat, but is still not the most desired form of coal. As more heat and pressure is applied to lignite, it turns into bituminous coal. Bituminous coal is extensively used in industries as a raw material and is in great demand because of its high heat content. As more heat and pressure is applied to bituminous coal, it turns into anthracite coal. Anthracite coal is the highest grade of coal. It has very little moisture and is highly desirable because of its high heat content. But unfortunately, the supply of anthracite coal in this world is very limited. Now let us understand how petroleum and natural gas were formed. 300 to 400 million years ago, tiny marine plants and animals died and were buried on the ocean floor. Over time, the marine plants and animals were covered with layers of silt and sand. For millions of years, the remains were buried deeper and deeper. The enormous heat and pressure turned these remains into oil and natural gas. Today, we drill down through layers of sand, silt, and rock to reach the rock formations that contain oil and natural gas deposits. I conclude my lecture here. In today's lecture, I discussed sedimentary rocks, their formation, their characteristics, and the different types of sedimentary rocks. Thank you and have a nice day.